The country I chose for my backyard conservation project was the Bahamas. I chose the Bahamas because I have a friend that's family is from there and they go there every summer. I did specifically Andros Island because I was interested in the Bahamian oriole, which was endemic here, and I was having trouble contacting with my contact who was from the greater Bahamas region, so just keep that in mind, please. As I stated previously, I did want this ecosystem to kind of cater to the Bahamian oriole, as it is endemic to Andros Island and Andros Island alone, which is one of the bigger islands of the Bahamas, but that is still a very small area. So, in regards to its habitat, I decided to use the Caribbean pine, as it is a native plant to the Bahamas and one of the habitats that Bahamian orioles are known to live in. The next evidence of softscape that I decided to introduce was the groundsel tree. So the groundsel tree acts as habitat and a food source for a lot of the animals, and it primarily acts as a habitat for the prey that I wanted to introduce for the Bahamian oriole, since they are omnivores, technically more carnivorous. So, who lives on those types of trees? So, a specific example that I decided to show was the plume moth and the plume caterpillar. So, the plume caterpillar lives in the buds of the tree and eats around the buds while they grow up, while when they grow up into the plume moths, they do suck the nectar out of those same flowers. The last two animals that I wanted to formally introduce were the curly-tailed lizard and the white-crowned pigeon. So the white-crowned pigeon is going to be attracted by the pigeon plum tree, which is a type of tree that has these sourish plums, and that tree is also endemic to the Bahamas. So these plums actually can act as a snack for multiple of the species, including the insects such as the plume moth, the Bahamian oriole, and especially the white-crowned pigeon. And as it is not a primary food source of the Bahamian oriole, the white-crowned pigeon would not infringe on its territory. Then for the for the curly-tailed lizard, I decided to have some sea purslane, which would attract some of the insects, especially in the area of the Bahamas. And because I decided to make my yard on the coast where sea purslane tends to grow. The curly-tailed lizard is also an insectivore, meaning that it eats largely insects. And although you may think this may hinder the food chain as it leads to more competition with the Bahamian oriole, the Bahamian oriole is also known to eat small lizards from time to time, so I believe there would be population control in that regard. Just to make everything more clear, I would like to say that the groundsel tree are the white flowered tree, the very long tree is the Caribbean pine, the pink flowers is the sea purslane, and the little red berry tree is the pigeon plum tree. The hardscapes I decided to include was heat lamps, shallow water bowls, rocks, a butterfly feeder, a porch, a nectar feeder, a bird bath, and a dining area. So the heat lamps, shallow dishes, and rocks are all for the curly-tailed lizard. So for this reptile, I decided that I wanted to have some of the rocks be on the porch because Bahamian yards are they're usually very small because it is an island country, and the concept of a yard is kind of foreign to them in the first place. So I decided that I wanted to move some of the rocks onto the porch, and so I can do that, I introduced a heat lamp. I also put some on the side of the porch, and as I put them on the side of the porch, I put some sea purslane right next to it, and some shallow water dishes so they can just have a natural source of water kind of in this made up ecosystem. The nectar feeder is to introduce more birds into the area because I just believe that the Bahamas is very known for its beautiful avian life, and this way we can attract more birds that won't infringe on the territory of like the Bahamian oriole or any of the other birds mentioned beforehand. The butterfly feeder is also to attract more animal life and also feed the plume moths more than just the groundsel trees that I have planted in the yard. The bird bath is a water source for the birds. I didn't want to introduce like a naturally occurring water source in my yard because the Bahamas is a region. I didn't want to do blue holes, which was like sinkholes, because I felt like it would be structurally unsound. And again, I wanted my yard to be on the coast. The last hardscapes that I introduced was the porch and dining area. So the reason I introduced the porch is because porches are very common in the Bahamas since it is a tropical region and it's also a very social region. So to add more experience design, I kind of wanted to put a dining area on the porch so they can talk and look at the ecosystem that we've created in this yard. So with no further ado, this is our final landscape. As you can see, the A's are the rocks, which are made for the lizards, and there are rocks both on the side and on the porch. There's also a bunch of tiny rocks under the porch because since it is an island region, a lot of the porches are stilted in case of hurricanes and tsunamis, which are the same thing. Then you can also see it's only 3 by 4 yards because even with even though I chose one of the bigger islands, it is only about, I want to say, 2,300 square miles. So I had to keep it pretty short and pretty small. I introduced a lot of multiples just because trees are very common in the area, but yards are not. So I just decided that I would add a lot of trees, but not necessarily make it a yard, and have the yard be very close together so they aren't infringing on too much space. So that's why a lot of it is very porch-centric with the groundsel trees close to the porch, and also the bird baths. I wanted 2 bird baths because I just didn't want them to infringe on each other's territory. Make sure that there is 2 sources for the avian life to drink the water. Same thing with the shallow little bowls. I wanted to make sure that they weren't all trying to drink from the same source at the same time, especially if it's like a little amount. I had the Caribbean pines kind of in the corner, closer to the coast. The sea purslane, just imagine that going onto the coast and close to the beach. I also had the table on the porch, like I said, because it is a very social culture, as my contact told me. It is a very social culture. It's very common for people to invite others into their home and feed them. So I felt like that was a good way to incorporate that aspect of the culture. With the butterfly feeder and the nectar feeder, I wanted to keep it very close to the porch to act as like experience design. So I actually had them hanging up from the porch. And that is also helpful because it is close to the groundsel trees, so it's very quick transport between those areas, since butterflies and the moths, which are kind of the same family, both feed on that nectar, and there's nectar there and there's nectar there. I kind of imagined this house as a like grandparents' yard or an aunt's yard, so they kind of want to use it as like an experience, so they can have more people around them because they're old and they want to stay at home, but also have people to interact with. And I believe this is an experiential design because the water, especially with the bird baths and the shallow water bowls, you can fill those up, and that would be very fun for kids to do, where you fill up the waters and then see the animals drink and eat and all that stuff. And also you're really close to the action, so you can always like give them a fruit or
take a fruit and just see how they interact. So I feel like that is one reason that this is an experiential design.